Glory be to God who gives us the word. May God write that word on our hearts, and may God and God alone receive glory, honor, and praise. It was a beautiful summer day when our boat pulled out of the harbor in Erie, Pennsylvania. It was a little sightseeing cruise, a 2-hour tour, to paraphrase the line from Gilligan's Island. Everyone was enjoying themselves as we pulled away. Seagulls followed us looking for a handout. The captain of the boat was pointing out this feature and that of Presque Isle and its famous lighthouse. It was a perfect day. And then we noticed that the seagulls were gone. And then we noticed the faces of the crew. And then we saw the dark blue-black clouds. And then the waves began to churn. It was at that moment that another set of lyrics entered my mind. The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down, the big lake they call Gitche-Gumee. The lake, it is said, never gives up their dead when the gales of November turn gloomy. It wasn't November, and we weren't the Edmund Fitzgerald, but this was serious. The captain immediately turned the boat around, and the waves began lapping up against the boat and then oftentimes spraying over the gunwales, and we limped back into the harbor as the wind and waves tossed us about. I confess to you, my brothers and sisters, there was more than a few moments when I wondered if we would get back to the safety of that harbor. The incredible sense of fear and dread that came over me was more real than I could have imagined. It was a moment when I wondered whether I would live or die. There are really two kinds of storms. The first allows you plenty of warning, like a snowstorm or a hurricane. The warning goes out, and at least in Evansville, you rush to Schnucks and buy milk, bread, and toilet paper. There was also an unexplainable mad rush on celery during one of this year's storms, but I digress. Sometimes you can see the storm coming, and you have time to make preparation as best you can. The second kind of storm comes to you without any warning at all. Think tornado. There is no way to predict exactly where and when a tornado is going to hit. They come, they wreak their havoc and destruction, and leave, leaving behind devastation and despondency. Out on Lake Erie, we were caught in a storm like that. Unexpected, unforeseen, and unanticipated. So when I read the story of the disciples' little trip across the Sea of Galilee, you can see from one side to the other, the parallels were profound. What should have been a little, easy, relaxing trip turned into potential disaster. Fear enveloped and dread cast its heavy shroud, and as it happens in an instant, in the middle of doing something they knew as well as they knew their own names. They had sailed these waters again and again, and yet when the storm winds blew, they knew only panic and terror. Have you ever been in those waters? I don't mean literally, of course. We're going to let go of the literal storm and talk for a moment about those more metaphorical storms that blow into our lives from time to time. Those storms, both expected and unexpected, anticipated and unanticipated, always unwelcomed moments of our lives when we find ourselves thrown into turmoil and chaos. Have you been through one or two of those? Maybe it was a time when some of the basic securities of life were up in the air, where you were going to live or what you were going to do. Maybe it was a time when the dream job became a nightmare, or when even the job disappeared. Maybe it was a time when you watched your savings and investments take hit after hit after hit. Maybe it was a time when you had to make some tough decisions about your parents' care. Maybe it was a time when you had to make your way through a rough patch with the kids. Maybe it was a season of worry and anxiety over grandchildren. Maybe it was a time when school wasn't going well. Maybe it was hearing or not hearing from a college or a grad school. Maybe it was a time when you faced some serious challenges in your own life. Maybe it was a time when you owned up to an addiction. Maybe it was when you tried to make some significant changes in your life without much support from family or friends. Have I forgotten anyone? Have you had one or two of those times when the storm winds blew into your life and you thought the whole thing was going to fall apart? Have you known a moment or two when you thought the storm winds would overtake you? Whenever those storm times threaten to overtake us, what is the question that comes to our minds? At such times of chaos and fear, don't we cry out, "Where is God? Where is God in this? Why is God allowing this to happen? Why isn't God doing something about this?" And we just feel ourselves drying up. Elijah was feeling the storm winds blow in our Old Testament story for the morning. Elijah was in one of those storms you could see coming for miles away. It was totally predictable. Elijah had been speaking God's word to power, and you know, you just can't do that without getting a storm or two. There he was, hiding away from King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Yeah, that's where they got her name. And the very people God had called him to serve, he was hiding away in a cave. It was one of those stormy times when Israel was violently rejecting God's way, forsaking the covenant, tearing down God's altars, and killing God's prophets. That's some kind of stormy time, and an absolutely rotten time to be a prophet who speaks for God.